Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome back. Welcome back to Michael Reads. If you've been following the series, uh, you'll know over the past weeks we've worked our way through Bushido, The Soul of Japan by Inazo Nitobe. Chapter by chapter, we explored the ethical code that shaped the character of the samurai, a code built not only on on bravery in battle, but on discipline, responsibility, and integrity in everyday life. So today is a little different. Tonight isn't about a single chapter. Instead, we're going to step back and look at the entire philosophy as a whole. We're going to revisit each chapter, highlight the most important lessons, and reflect on why Bushido continues to resonate even today. Because although the samurai lived centuries ago, the questions Bushido asks about character, responsibility, and purpose are just as relevant now as they were then. So tonight we'll walk back through the book together, not so much as a summary, but as a reflection on the deeper principles behind it. And before we get started, if you enjoy exploring powerful ideas from great books and turning them into lessons we can actually apply to life, make sure you subscribe to the channel and join the conversation in the comments as we go along. If you could give me, please, a quick thumbs up just to let me know if the sound is coming through nice, loud, and clear. I am a one-man team, so sometimes I do fumble on my setup a little bit. So, yeah, just a quick little thumbs up would be great. But before I proceed, I'll just have a quick drink. So, in chapter 1, which was titled Bushido as an Ethical System, the book opens by explaining that Bushido was never written as a formal code of law. Unlike many Western systems of ethics that were laid out in written rules and doctrines, Bushido developed naturally within Japanese culture. It was passed down through behavior, expectations, and examples rather than instruction manuals. Yeah, didn't sit in classrooms memorizing moral philosophy. Instead, they observed the conduct of their adults. They watched how their fathers responded to conflict. They listened to stories about loyalty, courage, and sacrifice. In other words, Bushido functioned as a living culture of character. This is an important point because it reminds us that the strongest moral frameworks are not those imposed externally through rules, but those absorbed internally through upbringing, example, and community expectation. Bushido, therefore, became less about what people were told to do and more about who believed they were supposed to be. Chapter 2, which is titled The Sources of Bushido. Inazo Nitobe explains that Bushido didn't emerge from a single philosophical tradition. Instead, it was shaped by the combination of three powerful influences: Confucianism, Buddhism, and Shinto. Confucianism contributed the structure of duty and hierarchy. It emphasized loyalty to superiors, respect for parents, and responsibility within society. Buddhism brought emotional depth and philosophical calm. It helped the samurai develop a level of detachment from fear, particularly the fear of death. This detachment allowed them to act with composure even under extreme pressure. Shinto added the spiritual dimension. It encouraged reverence for ancestors, loyalty to the nation, and an appreciation for purity and sincerity. Together, these influences created a code that balanced discipline, spirituality, and social responsibility. The samurai were therefore expected not only to fight bravery, but to think deeply, act responsibly, and carry themselves with dignity. Then we went on to chapter 3, rectitude, or in other words, justice. Rectitude is presented as the cornerstone of Bushido. Rectitude refers to the ability to determine what is right and then act upon that understanding without hesitation. For the samurai, moral clarity mattered more than personal convenience. Once the correct course of action had been identified, the expectation was that it would be followed with conviction. Nitobe describes rectitude as the backbone of character. Without it, courage becomes recklessness, kindness becomes weakness, and loyalty becomes blind obedience. So, rectitude ensures that every other virtue rests upon a stable foundation of moral judgment. It requires individuals to ask themselves a simple but powerful question: what is the right thing to do here? And once the answer is clear, Bushido demands that action follows. And then we went into chapter 4, which is titled Courage. Right? Courage within Bushido is not defined as the absence of fear. Instead, it is defined as acting rightly despite fear. The samurai understood that fear is a natural human response. What mattered was whether fear controlled decision making. Nitobe makes a clear distinction between reckless bravery and moral courage. So, charging into danger without any thought may appear heroic, but it lacks wisdom. True courage arises when an individual recognizes danger and still chooses the path that duty requires. Courage, therefore, becomes closely tied to rectitude. It is the strength required to follow the right path when that path is difficult. We went into chapter 5, benevolence. After exploring strength, Bushido turns towards compassion. Benevolence represents the responsibility that comes with power. The samurai class possessed authority and the capacity for violence. Bushido instead insisted that this power must be balanced with kindness and mercy. A strong warrior who lacks compassion becomes a tyrant. Therefore, the samurai were expected to use their strength to protect those who could not protect themselves. They were expected to show generosity, fairness, and empathy towards others. This principle highlights a crucial truth. True strength is measured not by how much power a person holds, but by how responsibly they use it. Chapter 6, Politeness. Politeness in Bushido was not superficial manners. It represented respect for others and mastery over oneself. A person who cannot control their temper, their words, or their emotions demonstrates a lack of discipline. Politeness, therefore, became an outward sign of inner control. Even in disagreement, the samurai were expected to maintain composure and dignity. This principle reminds us that genuine strength often expresses itself through restraint rather than aggression. Chapter 7, Veracity or Sincerity. Honesty held enormous weight within samurai culture. A samurai's word was considered binding. Formal contracts were often unnecessary because honor itself functioned as a guarantee. If a samurai gave his word, it was expected to be fulfilled. To lie was simply to deceive another person. To lie was not, simply to deceive another person. It was to undermine one's own character. Sincerity, therefore, required alignment between intention, speech, and action. This emphasis on truthfulness created a culture of trust where reputation was built through consistency and reliability. In chapter 8, which was one of my favorite, is titled Honor. Honor sits at the heart of Bushido. It represents the internal awareness of one's own moral worth. Unlike reputation, which depends on the opinions of others, honor comes from self-respect and personal integrity. A samurai judged himself not by applause or recognition, but by whether his actions aligned with his principles. This internal compass meant that behavior was guided by conscious rather than surveillance. In other words, honor encouraged people to act correctly even when no one was watching. Another favorite chapter of mine, which was chapter 9, loyalty. Loyalty was one of the most defining expectations placed upon the samurai. It meant unwavering commitment to one's lord, family, and obligations. Once loyalty was pledged, it was not meant to fluctuate based on convenience. This principle created stability within society because people could rely on one another. Loyalty, therefore, became a symbol of reliability, commitment, and trustworthiness. It emphasized the importance of standing by those to whom we have given our word. Chapter 10, the education and training of samurai. Bushido recognized that character must be cultivated through deliberate training. Young samurai were educated not only in martial arts but also in philosophy, literature, and culture. They studied poetry, calligraphy, and ethics. This balance ensured that the warrior did not become merely a fighter but a cultivated and thoughtful individual. The ideal samurai possessed both physical strength and intellectual depth. Their training aimed to develop discipline, wisdom, and maturity. Chapter 11, Self-Control. Self-control was considered essential to maintaining the other virtues. Without emotional discipline, courage becomes recklessness and honesty becomes harshness. The samurai therefore trained themselves to remain calm under pressure. They avoided displays of aggression, anger, panic, or excitement. This ability to regulate emotions allowed them to make decisions with clarity rather than impulse. Bushido reminds us that the greatest battles we fight are often within ourselves. A chapter which really hit hard was chapter 12, titled Institutions of Suicide and Redress. This chapter addresses the practice of seppuku, which is ritual suicide, which historically served as a means of restoring honor after failure or disgrace. While the act itself belongs to a different historical context, the principle behind it reveals how seriously the samurai regarded responsibility. Accountability really mattered. Actions carried consequences, and individuals were expected to face those consequences rather than to avoid them. The deeper lesson here concerns ownership of one's behavior and acceptance of responsibility. The sword, chapter 13. The samurai sword symbolized far more than just a weapon. It represented the soul of the warrior. Carrying a sword meant carrying the authority to take life, but also the responsibility to exercise that authority wisely. The sword served as a constant reminder of the balance between power and restraint. It symbolized both strength and discipline. In chapter 14, the training and position of women, Nitobe highlights the role of women played in sustaining the moral fabric of samurai society. Women were expected to embody many of the same virtues as men, including courage, loyalty, and self discipline. Their role in raising children and maintaining the stability of the household ensured that Bushido values continued from one generation to the next. In this sense, the preservation of the code relied on family, upbringing, and example. Chapter 15, the influence of Bushido. Over time, the principles of Bushido extended beyond the warrior class and began shaping broader Japanese society. Values such as discipline, loyalty, and honor influenced leadership, business practices, and everyday behavior. Bushido became more than a warrior code. It evolved into a cultural philosophy of responsibility and character. We then went into chapter 16. Is Bushido still alive today in the modern age? Nitobe, he concludes by asking whether Bushido still exists in this modern world. Although the samurai class disappeared, the values they embodied did not. The spirit of Bushido lives wherever individuals strive to act with integrity, discipline, and honor. It lives in people who keep their promises, take responsibility for their actions, and pursue excellence in their character. And one of the things I try to do consistently on Michael Reads is take the ideas we encounter in these books and relate them to the areas of life that I personally believe matter the most. Because reading isn't just about collecting information, it's about transformation. So whenever I go through a book, I ask myself how its lessons connect to the things that truly shape a meaningful life. Things like health, wealth and success, spiritual soundness, feeling blessed and grounded, philanthropy and contributing something positive to the world, energy, having the vitality to actually live life fully, feeling free of unnecessary problems or by maintaining a clear mind and clear conscience, and building the strongest, most meaningful relationships possible. When we look at Bushido through that lens, its relevance becomes even clearer. A life guided by rectitude and integrity tends to create peace of mind. A life built on discipline supports health, success, and stability. A life rooted in loyalty and sincerity strengthens relationships. A life balanced with benevolence and compassion encourages contribution to philanthropy, and a life guided by self-control creates clarity, the ability to move through life without constantly creating unnecessary problems for ourselves or others. In many ways, Bushido is simply a reminder that character shapes everything. The quality of our thinking influences the quality of our actions. And the quality of our actions ultimately determines the quality of our lives. If you've followed along with this Bushido journey, thank you. Thank you very much. Your engagement, your thoughts in the comments, and your willingness to explore these ideas together have made the series incredibly rewarding. Within the next few days, I'll be announcing the next book. It's just over there, but I won't reveal it now. I'll be announcing the next book we'll be covering here on Michael Reed's. And I tell you now, it is definitely up there with the greatest books ever written. I'll be revealing it on my YouTube community page and across my socials. And the first live session will be scheduled with enough time for everyone after I've revealed the book to acquire a copy of this book, if you so please, so that you can read along with me. Because the goal here is to build something special, a community of avid readers who prefer to download useful information into their brains the old-fashioned way, by reading great books and discussing them together. So keep an eye on the community page over the next few days if you turn on your notifications on there. And if you have enjoyed the series, make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss the next one. If you would like to share the series, I've stacked all the chapters we went through as well as this final summary into a playlist so that they're all nice and easy for you to find. But on the whole, I'd like to say thank you for joining me on Michael Reads. I appreciate your time. I appreciate all your feedback. I will hope to see you on the next one when we start a new book, a new chapter, new lessons that will affect how we conduct our lives and how we travel through this journey of life. Thank you for joining me on Michael Reads. Till the next one, ciao.